The villains keeps kinds of way.
The case of Anneliese Michel has gained prominence since her death was deemed a murder by negligence at trial. The public has focused on Anneliese's parents as well as the two Catholic priests who cared for her in the year leading up to her death. In their evidence, they were convinced that Anneliese was possessed by 5 devils within her and that an exorcism was done for 10 months without medical supervision. Eventually, Anneliese died of severe malnutrition and dehydration. What actually happened to Anneliese? Was she possessed by the devil, or was she merely mentally disturbed? Today, we shall reopen the case of her mysterious death. Anneliese was born on September 21, 1952, and named Anna Elizabeth Michel. She was born and resided in Liebelfing, Bavaria, West Germany, until the end of her life. She hailed from a fervent Roman Catholic family. Joseph and Anna, Anneliese's parents, would always take her and her 3 sisters to Mass twice a week. There was nothing unusual about Anneliese. She was quiet, but she socialized well. When Anneliese was 16, her medical records revealed that she suffered from severe seizures and was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. Ever since, Anneliese has been taking medication to prevent her epilepsy from reoccurring. However, her mental state appeared to deteriorate so severely that Anneliese was admitted to a mental hospital. In June 1970, it was discovered that she had multiple seizures while undergoing treatment at the mental hospital. The doctor prescribed anti-seizure medication and intensive care for her. Unfortunately, the treatment and care did not alleviate Anneliese's condition. Instead, it deteriorated day after day, and she began hallucinating. Anneliese constantly stated that she had seen devil faces. Seeing this condition, the doctor prescribed her Alept, which is similar to chlorpromazine and is frequently used to treat a variety of psychosis conditions such as schizophrenia and delusions. Anneliese's condition improved, and she was able to return to her normal life in 1973. She studied at the University of Würzburg, but due to her past condition, Anneliese became slightly reclusive. Her classmates described her as quiet and profoundly religious. In the same year, Anneliese was depressed, her mental state deteriorated, she hallucinated when praying, and she complained of hearing voices in her ears. The voices told her that she had been cursed and would rot in hell. Although Anneliese continued to undergo treatment at the mental institution, her health and depression deteriorated. Anneliese became more frustrated with the state of her life, particularly after having to continue taking medication for 5 years. Following the deterioration of her mental state caused her to exhibit unusual shifts. Growing up in a religious family, she became unexpectedly allergic to and avoided Christian sacred places and objects, such as crosses. Anneliese once visited the region of San Damiano, Italy, with her relatives. While there, Anneliese refused to go past crosses and refused to drink from a Christian holy spring, prompting her relatives to conclude she was demon-possessed. Anneliese confessed that she was unable to enter the sacred place because, in her vision, the ground around it was engulfed in raging flames, and she could not face the pain of forcing herself to go inside. Anneliese continued her story. She could not even look at the pictures and sculptures of the saints anymore, because in Anneliese's eyes they were very shiny, and her eyes could not handle the dazzling gleam that was glistening. After returning from San Damiano, strange things happened again. Anneliese's mother stated that she saw stigmata which are bodily wounds, scars, and suffering that emerge in the same locations as Jesus Christ's crucifixion wounds, such as on the hands, wrists, feet, near the heart, head, and back. Anneliese started to believe she could communicate with Maria. All of these strange occurrences prompted her family and the surrounding community to believe that Anneliese had been possessed by the devil. Her family's concerns eventually led them to consult various priests for an exorcism. However, at the time, the priests refused to carry out an exorcism on Anneliese, instead suggesting that her medical treatment be continued and telling them that exorcisms could not be performed carelessly and required the bishop's consent to do so. In the Catholic Church, official approval to execute an exorcism on someone is only granted once they have determined that the person meets the church's criteria. The church party must be able to confirm that the person is actually possessed and has fallen under demonic control. Actually, Anneliese had already demonstrated one of her characteristics, which was a strong aversion to religious objects. But the church still did not give permission for an exorcism until Anneliese's physical condition deteriorated. Not only that, Anneliese also demonstrated aggression by injuring herself, eating spiders or flies, and drinking her own urine. In November 1973, Anneliese began treatment with Tegretol, an anti-seizure medicine and mood stabilizer. Anneliese was still prescribed antipsychotic medicines, which she took on regularly. Despite all of the medications she was consuming, Anneliese's symptoms worsened, and she began snarling and shouting that she was seeing devils and throwing things around. During the family's attempts to have an exorcism conducted on Anneliese, they met Pastor Ernst Alt. When Pastor Ernst Alt saw Anneliese, he remarked that she did not appear to have epilepsy and that what appeared to be seizures were not actually seizures. Pastor Ernst Alt was convinced that Anneliese was suffering from demonic possession, and he urged the local bishop, Bishop Joseph Stangl, to authorize an exorcism of Anneliese. In 1975, in a letter written by Anneliese, she told Pastor Ernst Alt, "I am nothing. Everything about me is vanity. What should I do? I have to improve. You pray for me." In her letter, she also wrote, "I want to suffer for other people, but this is so cruel." This letter made Pastor Ernst Alt feel increasingly sorry for Anneliese, and he did not stop urging Bishop Joseph Stangl, who, after a lengthy evaluation of Anneliese's condition, finally granted Pastor Arnold Renz permission to perform an exorcism on Anneliese in September 1975, in accordance with the Ritual Romanum of 1614. The permission was granted with the command that the entire exorcism be performed in secrecy. After obtaining permission, Pastor Renz conducted the first exorcism session on September 24, 1975. Exorcism sessions on Anneliese began to occur on a regular basis after that. She would typically have 1 or 2 sessions each week, each lasting up to 4 hours. Since her first session, it is known that Anneliese started talking increasingly about dying to expiate the sins of today's youth and apostate pastors of the modern church. She also asked her parents to stop consulting doctors and completely stop her medical treatment and solely focus on the exorcism ritual. In some of the sessions recorded by the pastor, Anneliese was heard speaking in a different voice. The voice claimed to be the demons inside Anneliese. They all talked in German, which sounded creepy. Exorcism was done session after session to evict the demon from Anneliese's body, with 67 sessions taking place over 10 months from 1975 to 1976. Anneliese began to refuse to eat and drink while her body was parched, and her weight dropped rapidly as a result. Anneliese's body weight at the end of her life was barely 66 pounds, or approximately 30 kilograms. Anneliese died on July 1, 1976, after suffering immensely. She died in her house in a terrible condition, with the autopsy report indicating that the cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration from over a year of hunger during the exorcisms. Her knees were found to be broken from constant kneeling. She was no longer able to move without assistance and was reportedly suffering from pneumonia. Anneliese's death aroused the suspicions of various parties who suspected neglect and omissions throughout the exorcism process. An investigation was eventually conducted, and the findings indicated that Anneliese's death could have been avoided at least a week before she died. Finally, in 1976, Anneliese's parents, Pastor Ernst Alt and Pastor Arnold Renz, were charged with negligent murder. Erich Schmidt-Leichner, a well-known German lawyer, defended Anneliese's parents, but the church hired and paid for the pastor's lawyers. The trial began on March 30th, 1978, and the case attracted a lot of attention. The courtroom got incredibly crowded, and the doctors who treated Anneliese testified that she was not possessed. It was simply the psychological effect of her rigorous religious upbringing and epilepsy. Dr. Richard Roth, whom Pastor Ernst Alt requested medical assistance for Anneliese, allegedly informed Anneliese during the exorcism that there were no injections to combat the devil. This could have influenced Anneliese's decision to ask her parents to discontinue her medical treatment. Lawyer Erich Schmidt-Leichner later contended that the exorcism was lawful and that the German Constitution protects citizens to practice their religious beliefs without restraint. During the trial, Erich Schmidt-Leichner and defense lawyers from the church played recordings taken at the exorcism sessions. Some of the recordings sounded what they claimed to be devils.
Sind wir schon drei?
They also claimed that Anneliese was ultimately free of demonic possession as a result of the exorcism performed shortly before her death. Meanwhile, Bishop Joseph Stangl, who granted permission, stated that he was unaware of Anneliese's health condition when he permitted the exorcism. In April 1978, after a series of trials, Anneliese's parents and the two priests were sentenced to prison on charges of murder by negligent homicide, but were placed on probation and ordered to bear the costs of the legal proceedings. The sentence was tougher than what the prosecutor had requested and recommended, which was for them to be punished and found guilty without facing any jail time. The ramifications were severe at the time, particularly for the Catholic Church, which was quickly brought to the public's and media's notice for approving the ancient exorcism ritual. Several years later, at a conference, the German bishops retracted the claim that Anneliese was possessed. Meanwhile, Anneliese's family requested the authorities for permission to exhume their daughter's remains, which had been interred hastily in a cheap coffin. Nearly 2 years after her burial, on February 25, 1978, Anneliese's remains were placed in a new coffin lined with lead. According to rumors, Anneliese's grave has become a pilgrimage site since her death, with a small group of Catholics believing that Anneliese atoned for the sins of boisterous and apostate priests, as well as juvenile sinners. Since Anneliese's death, the number of officially sanctioned exorcisms in Germany has decreased. In fact, the regulations have been clenched, and exorcisms are only permitted in specific cases. Anneliese's father, Joseph Michel, died in 1999. In a 2006 interview, her mother, Anna Michel, proclaimed that she had no regrets and had done the right thing because she saw Christ's mark on Anneliese's hand. The most recent news about Anneliese is that a fire broke out in her house on June 6, 2013. Despite the fact that the local police deemed that it was a case of arson, certain locals believed it was linked to Anneliese's exorcism.